Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chart Chat number 68. We're excited to dive into box plots and how we prep for data presentations. This is Chart Chat. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Makulec, and I'm joining you live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my colleagues, Andy, Jeff, and Steve. Welcome to everyone to Chart Chat. We're excited today to dive into two big topics today to go ahead and explore the world of box plots and presentation tips. But before we do that, let me hand it in a round robin. Andy, do you want to say hello and where you're joining us from?
Hello from a sunny Oxford, England, for sunshine in weeks. The floods are receding. It's delightful to be here.
Excellent. Jeff?
Hey, Jeff Shaffer from the University of Cincinnati, where we finally got rid of all the snow. So, yeah, it's looking nice here now.
Steve Wexler from Briarcliff Manor, the cradle of civilization, where we have been absolutely dumped upon by massive amounts of snow and trying to dig ourselves out.
We're going to blame the groundhog for that one, right? The groundhog said more winter, and you got the peak of winter, I think. There you go. All right. Well, for anyone who hasn't joined us before, welcome to Chart Chat. We're excited to have you here. Please feel free, if you're joining us live, to add where you're joining us from and to say hello in the chat on YouTube or on LinkedIn. This is Chart Chat number 68. Amazing that we've done 68 of these so far. And as always, it's more than just chit chat. It's Chart Chat, where we dive into the good, the bad, and the scaredy cats of data visualization. Across the four of us, there are actually 3 books, not just 2, but the most recent is Dashboards That Deliver, which we've been loving some of the recent LinkedIn posts sharing about the book with your communities. Thank you to everyone who's been giving a lot of love to Dashboards That Deliver. And as always, you are encouraged to join the debate. Think of this as the digital water cooler for data visualization conversations. We encourage you to join the conversation in the chat below. We love bringing your comments up on the live stream, as well as finding ways to connect with you at our after party, which will happen 45 minutes into the show, where we pop on off of YouTube and over to Zoom, where you can actually join the conversation and share your thoughts on box plots and presentations. We also want to make a quick plug at the very start of the show today to ask you to help us improve Chart Chat. We've been going for 68 episodes for many years now, and we would love to know what your thoughts are on how we can improve Chart Chat and make it better so that it is a show you love to both watch and recommend to your friends and family and other data enthusiasts in your life. You can find the survey link on the QR code that you see at the top, and we'll also plug it into the chat box below for those of you watching online. Today, we're going to dive into box plots as our first place to go ahead and talk about and start with where they are, when we use them, and perhaps when we avoid them. And we have different thoughts and feelings about box plots. But before we dive into those, Jeff is going to give us a deep dive into what a box plot even is for someone who is newer to the world of data viz or just needs a quick refresher on this way of looking at statistical data. Next, Steve is going to lead us through a conversation about how we prep for data presentations, which came out of a prep call we had where we started talking about the different ways that we prep for different data presentations, including Chart Chat. And I can't wait to hear from my Chart Chat chums about the ways in which you think about prepping for Chart Chat and more. But with that, let's go ahead and hand it over to Jeff to teach us all the ins and outs of box plots.
All right, well, let's dive in. Before I show you a box plot, I just want to refresh our memory of a dot plot with jitter, because it's going to make some appearances in here on some of the slides. And so what we have is a quantitative scale, and we've jittered it with randomness. Those dots are just spread based on some randomness. And so you're going to see that in the box plots or in some of these things that I show you. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage with that. So the topic really is about box plots and what purpose they serve and how they're constructed. I find there's a lot of confusion around them. Even when people write about them, I don't find they tell the whole story. And so I thought I would go a little deeper. And I would say to you is, hey, there's a bunch of dots here in the strip plot, or just this row of column of dots. What is the distribution? Where is the middle? Where are the outliers? Can we tell what the outliers are? And that's really, in a form, what the box plot helps us do. It kind of sets the stage on what we call the 5-number summary. And if you think about the 5-number summary, we start with, the central tendencies. You have an average and you have a middle. Well, your middle, the median there is your half. And then if you split your other parts in half again, you have quartiles, right? And so those are sort of where you get your 5-number summary from. You start with your minimum of your data, your first quartile, your middle, your third quartile, and your end. And so you have 5 numbers, and it kind of tells you the spread of your data. What's the min and the max of your data? Something you probably would want to know. If you go back in history where this comes from, I'll give a shout out to Mary Eleanor Spear. She invented the range bar. John Tukey gets credit for the box plot. I'm going to disagree a little bit here and say range bar equals box plot, because not really, not quite. Tukey does talk about these range plots, but you'll see in her writing, she's going with that 5-number summary. She's talking about the min of the data, the first quartile, the third quartile. So you have the box with the middle, and then you have these ends on it. Well, Tukey went further on this. And so that range, while it gives us the min and the max of the data, you can't really tell where the outliers are, because if you're going down to the min of the data or you're going to the max of the data, you don't know what that is. So a range bar is certainly helpful. It certainly helps us with that 5-number summary. But what John Tukey did is invents these things called fences, inner fence and outer fence. Today, we call that 1.5 times IQR and 3 times IQR. The IQR, he called this step and the H spread. He didn't really call it the interquartile range in his book, but he has the 1.5 times the H spread. So that's 1.5 times the IQR. And this is in his book. It's freely available online as a PDF, so you can check it out. The idea of the inner and outer fences, though, now come into play when you're looking for your outliers. And this is where I find there's some confusion, and I get it. I often just say, it goes out to 1.5 times IQR. Well, the IQR is just the size of the box. Half of your data lives in the box. And then we take that box and we just layer it on 3 times. So if you go 3 times out that size of the box, then you'll see your out 3 IQRs, 1 box, 2 box, 3 box. And if you go half, 1.5, then you're out 1.5 times IQR. And that's where we get this 1.5 times IQR. Now, you'll notice that the whisker doesn't actually go out all the way to 1.5 IQR. The whisker stops at your maximum point inside that inner fence. And so what that does is tells you, okay, all the points that are within that inner fence, the maximum range on both sides. And then when you go past that inner fence, then you can see these outliers. And what's interesting about the 1.5 that John Tukey used is it gives us what we call a mild outlier. We can see these mild outliers in our data. If we go out past 3 to the outer fence, then you get these crazy outliers. They're very, very, very extreme. And so to show this practically, I thought I would look at a probability density function. That's what we call this, the normal distribution or the bell curve. You can kind of see that if you're way out to this outer fence, you're way, way out on the tails of the distribution. But if you're at that 1.5, you sort of have some of that tail in there. And so we can mathematically look at that and say, okay, well, what does that mean mathematically? And I think in a nutshell, this is where the power of this box plot comes in, because at that 1.5 times IQR, you're talking about an outlier that's 1 in 143, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500. You're outside that fence, that inner fence. But if you went out to the outer fence, you got something that's super extreme in your data. You're 1 in 50 million. So it's just not going to occur ever. And so it's not useful to be out that far. Same with a 2 IQR. If you went at 2 IQR, you'd be like 1 in 1,500 points. And so you're getting too rare for the outlier to be meaningful. So that's really the purpose of this 1.5 times IQR. So if we have that and we can use it now as an outlier detector, then let me pull this up, and you all feel free in the chat to chime in here. I want you all, and my chart chat guests can go at this too. How many outliers do you see in this data? Just take a guess. Does Asia have an outlier? Does Oceania? Does Middle East? How many are there? Is there 5? Is there 8? Is there 2? Is there 3? Just put some guesses out there. I'm curious to see what people would say. Okay, Andy says 4. Which 4?
Well, I don't trust you haven't put a trick question in the data, so I'm thinking Middle East and Oceania, and then I'm just gambling 2 of the others are, and then the rest look like they may not be.
Okay, so what about you, Amanda?
Yeah.
I agree with Oceania. I agree with the Asia, Oceania, Middle East. Seem like they have the clear ones.
Yeah.
I would guess the Americas one is too, because of how much clustering there is at the top. And I'm wondering if you're tricking us with like that last lingering one on Africa at the top of the chart around around 80, around like 87. I'm like, is that one actually just tricking us that it looks like a cluster, but it's not a real cluster because there's such a concentration farther down?
You would. What about you, Steve?
Oh, I resisted. I took a screenshot of this during when you showed it, and I resisted going ahead and looking, figuring out the answer ahead of time. I'm just going with the Americas and Asia on this.
Americas and Asia. Okay.
Oh, and Dan,
so Dan says 1, and Ida O'Keefe says 3 or 4.
You got 3 and 4s. Yeah. Okay. Well, guess what? We can put a box plot on here, and we can tell very quickly what is and what isn't. And so that is really kind of the power instantly of what a box plot tells us, right? We can see that at the same life expectancy of Papua New Guinea, it's not, but Yemen, it is. Now, this data, you could argue this data in any number of ways. You could say Yemen is really close to Africa, right? It's maybe more like an Africa population. There is water separating it there, but maybe it is more on that side. But by region, to the rest of the region, you can kind of see that we have the 4 outliers there. So I think that's the power of it. Let's look a little deeper. And I don't want to hit you with technical talk here. These are much easier, I think, than the names imply.
Too late, Jeff.
What's that?
We're there.
Sorry, I said you don't want to hit us with technical talk. I just said too late.
Well, let me see if I can explain it in a non-technical way. When we talk about skewness, you're going to grab the tail of that distribution and pull it one way or the other. You're going to pull it to the right or you're going to pull it to the left. You're going to stretch something out and you're just going to grab one of the tails and take a pull to the right or left. When we talk about kurtosis, we're going to sit on top of that distribution. You're just either going to squash it or you're going to pull it up high. And if you pull it up high, what's going to happen? More points are going to come into the center. Your box plot, by the way, gets what? Narrower. If I sit on that distribution, my variation goes wider, and so it gets fatter, and so my box plot gets fatter. If I pull the tail to the right, my whisker is going to go to the right. If I pull my tail to the left, my whisker is going to go to the left. And so we can visualize skewness and even kurtosis in the box plot just by looking at how that distribution spreads. We can take something that's more normal in the middle. We can see in a normal distribution, your middle and your mean are going to be pretty much identical, right? Half. But when I start stretching the tail to the left or stretching the tail to the right, the average gets pulled way over there. That's the dotted line, the median there in the middle. But look what the box plot does, right? The box plot holds all your data over there on the left skewed. You can see that left skewed, when it's pulled to the left, the whisker goes to the left, but your box stays over on the right. And the opposite happens on something that is the other way. This is your dot plot with jitter on top of it. It helps to show the points. Another variation are these notches in these box plots, which shows us what we call the confidence interval, and we have a 95% confidence interval. Now what you can do with this box plot is you can compare distributions and see if they're statistically different. I can say, by the way, if anybody's not heard of the UWorld data questions, this is the preparation for the MCAT. This is a question on that. And so there you can see these 3 box plots. The one on the right is statistically different than the other 2 distributions because you can see the confidence intervals don't line up at all. There's no overlap between this. And so now we know something about that distribution. Now, where's the problem with them? This. You see some bimodal distribution, or over on the right, your data is giving you the middle finger. And if you have that, then all of a sudden you can't tell because the box plot looks identical. So it doesn't solve everything. Now, there are solutions for this, and we can go down that path. There's something called a kernel density estimator, and you can do that with it's a violin plot or a half of a violin, or in this case, the top part, the half violin of the plot is your cloud. Your dot plot with jitter is your rain, and I put the box plot underneath it just to look at that. And you go back to something like this, the box plot helps me. If you only had 100 or maybe even 500, 800, 1,000 points, you could probably do it in an organized way like a histogram, just put a sort of a dot plot together that kind of gives you the distribution. But nobody's done better or more in this area than Daniel Zvinka. He's created this piled plot, this dot density, and it's just another way. It is kind of half of a violin plot, if you will, but it really shows the density of where those dots are. You have Elon Musk tweets, and you have a great blog post that Steve did on data revelations on some survey data where Daniel added a kernel density in there. So that's really what I have on this. That's the on time, I think. That's the anatomy of a box plot, how it's used, why I think it can be used effectively. It is complicated, yes, but I think it does have some uses that people don't quite leverage.
I mean, Steve, you got a shout out with your margin of error post. Do you want to take first pass at your thoughts on this non-technical explanation of box plots, and if or when you use them or not?
I can just listen to Jeff forever. That was just a masterclass in explaining a tough concept. The fact that there's a bunch of stuff in this that I didn't know. One was why you will sometimes get the whiskers and they are not symmetrical, because, well, the whiskers go to whatever is the most extreme point, not necessarily the interquartile range. And I didn't even know about the concept of outer fence. Speaks to why I often don't reach for something like this, because if it confuses me, we're in trouble, because I'm a professional chart looker-atter. And if I don't have an understanding of this, most of the people that I'm working with are presenting to. Now, that said, if you're dealing with statisticians, if you are giving a presentation to the John Tukey Appreciation Society, this is exactly what you should be doing and using. And in fact, you'd be insulting your audience if you don't use the thing that they reach for and want to use. So I absolutely love this. I tend to show quartiles and medians. Maybe I'll show outliers, but I tend not to go with box plots because I find them a little confusing, and I fear my audience will. But this was just great. So
thank you.
I mean, those are spot on points, though, Steve, about the audience question and are you delivering on something that someone can understand? Andy, you talk a lot about data literacy and data communication for non-statistical people.
Yeah.
Do you like box plots?
I honestly, in the interest of time, I think Steve has just said every note I wrote down. Steve has just said, and primarily it's the reason I don't go to box plots is that I don't feel confident in using them myself. And and then where are the use cases where you can guarantee your audiences have sat through a 12-minute Jeff Shaffer presentation before using the chart they are presented with? The places where you can guarantee that is the case are very rare. When you have them, woohoo, go box plot. Well done, Jeff. That was great.
Would you think that's layering it like this would be less technical for somebody where they don't really have to pay attention to the box itself, and you've now leveraged color for your outliers?
Yeah, I think that, yes. But then you still, the people are going, well, what do the horizontal lines mean? What are the fences, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a great stepping stone to complexity.
Yeah.
I do think one of the things you've shown in a number of these slides, Jeff, is how powerful it is to combine multiple charts together. And I think that's something that people don't always spend a lot of time thinking about is if I'm going to give you the more technical chart that makes it perhaps really useful statistically for someone with more advanced knowledge, how do I also give you the simpler chart, or vice versa, give the bigger amount of screen time or slide real estate to the simpler and easier to understand chart, maybe the dot plot or something else, and then go ahead and show the box plot for additional context. And knowing who your audience is and which of those two things you want to lead with so you don't lose somebody feels like a really important takeaway looking at a lot of these examples. Like this is a great example that gives you kind of a simpler way of looking at the data and then more statistical complexity below.
Great.
The other thing, Amanda, that where these things come up when I'm discussing, am I going to show a box plot, is a discussion of disaggregated data, showing the dots. Now, Jeff points out if you have 5 million dots, you can't show all the dots. But the surprise of, oh, here's your salary versus the average of everybody else, and you see your dot is not a little below the average. And then you show everybody's salary and you realize, oh my God, I'm not even in the first quartile. It's what happened here. So it's the not just showing the summary statistic, but also showing the underlying data, and it opens up a completely different understanding of it.
This makes me think of radar charts as another chart that you always feel like you have to explain to somebody and explain why they are looking the way that they are. But Jeff, you've got a lot of love in the chat for kind of the ways in which you've explained these concepts in really straightforward ways. And I think a comment from someone that they would be bookmarking this to come back to in the future if they have not got, if they need to go ahead and get a quick primer on the world of box plots and what they're looking at. So thanks for walking us through all of those pieces. As we go ahead and wrap up this segment, any closing thoughts from anyone on box plots? Or Jeff, do you want the last word on if or when you use them? Andy, I see a hand.
I would just agree with you on audience. Just know your audience. If I were building something for the general public, I tell my students I'd never put a box plot on there. I just don't think you're going to lose the audience when you try to explain it. But at my old company, I had very sophisticated operations and data science and business intelligence folks, and I if I put a box plot on there, I think they would get the idea.
Andy?
I've just asked Claude to vibe code an application that takes one of your slides and lets me drag and drop the fences left and right and put splines on the curves to live update the box plot to show those distributions.
There you go. We can see your app by the end of the show.
There we go.
Also, if folks go to datarevelations.com and type jitter plot, a word that Jeff bristles, he says, no, it's a strip plot with jitter, but he's allowed me to use, he's gotten over it, I think. Jitter plot, a lot of these discussions are there, and I'm referencing a lot of Jeff's approach to this. So just look up jitter plot and you'll find some discussions about this, and including some alternative approaches that Jeff suggests.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's go ahead and hand it over to Steve. It's all you to go ahead and talk all about the world of presentations.
Well, let me, with your permission, share this. So we just saw a great presentation from Jeff, and in a moment I'm going to ask him about what it took to put that together. But any of us who present and get up in front of a group of people admire some of the people that I'm going to show, and maybe have fantasies about presenting as well as they do. I got to see Sir Ken or Kenneth Robinson present twice. One time at the Tableau conference. Just sensational stuff.
And 0 slides.
Thank you, Jeff. Exactly, 0 slides. This is Hans Rosling. One of the greatest TED Talks ever from 2006. If you get nothing from what I'm blathering about, look up Hans Rosling TED Talk 2006. You won't be disappointed. I got to see Steve Jobs present in his second act when he had just founded Next Computer in front of a group of 300 people. And he was fantastic. And to be in that small an audience and watching him spin his magic. And then there's this fellow, Robert Benchley. And let me show you a presentation he did from a Fred Astaire, I think Adele Lewis movie from 1943. So give me a second to get this up and running. And here we go. And this is the type of presentation I think we want to avoid.
Now, I have prepared or had prepared some charts which will show you more graphically just what this bottleneck was and how this one man, aided of course by thousands of you employees, eliminated the bottleneck and substituted for it Now, here is a chart showing plastic production as compared with metal production in the year. Well, the year doesn't seem to be shown on here, so we'll say 1936 for fun, huh? In 1936, you'll see, or whatever year it was, that these things ran into fantastic figures. For instance, in 1936, 2,445,000, as compared with 3,350,000 in some other year, or 25% of 1936. And by 1936 is meant 1934. This is all per capita, mind you. Now we... Oh, that's what I was afraid of. This is the wrong chart. I thought, you see, this has got aluminum and nickel and tin on it, and we were going to work on man-hours here. Well, that's more like it. See, this has the years on it. That makes it much easier to understand.
So, Steve Jobs is one of the best presenters ever, and Robert Benchley, nice tux. So how do we make things more like the fellow on the left and less like the fellow on the right? By the way, I am sure my chart chat chums and the people here are now thinking about that. Oh, that first chart that he had, and it's a butterfly chart. And is that the most effective way to show that? We will leave that for another time. But let me stop sharing. And then, Jeff, since you just gave a really tremendous 12-minute presentation, and you said it was going to be a 12-minute presentation when you started, and I clocked it, and it was 12 minutes. I have several questions for you. I'm going to pose them now. What was the spark for this talk, first of all? Why did you want to discuss box plots now? How long did it take to put this 12-minute presentation together? How much material did you already have? How much stuff did you have to make from scratch? And to what degree did you vet the presentation? Did you try it out a few times? Did you practice it? And would you do it different now that you've done it? I'm guessing this is the first time publicly. It may not be this exact presentation. Would you feel that you need to do it several more times? So again, it's the why this presentation now? How long did it take to put this together? Did you rehearse it and practice it? And do you wish you could do it several more times?
Yeah, the impetus was really seeing some folks write about it. There were a couple articles by Nick in the Data Viz Society that had a couple things on box plots, some other things on LinkedIn and folks. But I'd say the primary was I was teaching a class this semester, and we're doing EDA, and one of the topics was box plot. And I just found that the slides that I had didn't go deep enough for the, it was fine for maybe my cursory undergrad class, but for my graduate class, I wanted to go deeper. As to how long, well, this is the first time I delivered it in this format, so you saw it live and first time ever done, but it is a mix of other content. So, I mean, if I jump in here real quick and just say, like, these opening slides here are content from other decks that we've used. This is just a screenshot of Twitter. This one diagram right here took 2 hours on a Saturday morning to vibe code with Python because I wanted to get the data very specifically, and I wanted everything to be, I had something in my mind that I was trying to get. out of it. And so that was very specific. There was another one that somebody else did online, and it's nice, but it just didn't, it was too busy and didn't really get across what I wanted to do. Some of these other slides I had for my classes, and I put them together. So I presented this in my class, and I presented this in my class. This I just built on the fly in Tableau. I referenced an old blog post I had and built that in a few minutes. And then this was vibe coded. All the pieces of it were vibe coded, as well as this, which Python. So those took a little bit, but it wasn't me sitting there coding. It was the computer coding. How did I get to 12 minutes? I don't have a good answer to that. I honestly just count slides almost. I knew that I had 27 slides. And for most people, they would say, you're never going to get through 27 slides in 12 minutes. I know at my pace, that's about where I am. If I'm moving really fast, I'm in the 20-second sort of range for a slide. And if I'm moving normal, which is still fast, I'm at a 30-second a slide. So I knew that with about 24, 27 slides, I'd be right at about 12 minutes. And that's kind of my benchmark for time, as long as I don't have something I'm dwelling on. I didn't practice it. I didn't even finish it until 10:15.
So, and Jeff, all told, given that you've been thinking about this a lot, you've presented about it, and how much time did it take to put together this 12-minute presentation? Don't include all the work that went into existing things. Roughly.
I mean, it was still hours, because like this diagram here of this took several hours, but I didn't build it for this. I built it for my class, and then I incorporated it in here, a month later. So it's hard to gauge, but hours of work for sure, but maybe hours of work on various things that came together very quickly for this.
That's an interesting point that I'm going to ask everybody about later, which is the one-off presentation versus, ooh, I've got this anatomy of a box plot slide, and I'm going to be using that for years. So the 2 hours for one slide may indeed be worth it. Amanda, how does this compare with how you prepare for a chart chat? And where does preparing for a chart chat differ than giving, let's say, a 45-minute presentation that's going to have a 15-minute Q&A?
I feel like with chart chat, we're often picking a topic, right? We're saying, let's go ahead and unpack this one single chart and go dive deep on it. And so it's a little bit less curation. I'm not introducing the talk with some kind of story or big picture agenda, then breaking down my talk into smaller sections and building it out. And so chart chat for me is a little bit more variable depending on whether we're talking about something that requires us redesigning charts. When we say, let's all take on a redesign, and each of us design the chart in different ways, that you're making new charts to go ahead and reflect the data, compared to last week's or last month's episode, where we were unpacking the components of an existing chart. And I was functionally building slides that were highlighting different sections of an existing chart. And it was more of the thinking process of mapping out what are the key points I want to make. Now, I usually start my presentations when I'm working on ones that are brand new with kind of blank slide sets that look something like this, that are just blank slides with big words on them, where I actually map out and storyboard out what my presentations look like. And I always feel like I now have Steve Francaneri floating in my head with people like things in threes. And so I think about what are the kind of three big things that I want to make sure that I focus on, whether that's breaking down the presentation itself into three sections or having kind of three big ideas that build up to one kind of big climax. It's really important to me to think about how I break a big 45-minute talk into smaller sections that also create opportunities for people to engage with me or do a poll or some way to change that state. Because these days it's really hard to keep folks' attention for a 45-minute long talk, especially if they're sitting on their computers and easily distracted. But the kind of blank slide sets and the storyboards here, I like because I can move things around, and it allows me to pull in slides from other places, similar to what Jeff talked about, where I'll say, to kind of reinforce this point, I'll go borrow from this content here. And that's how I get to these kind of scaffolded slides that I like a lot, where I then can create the repeating structures that I use, that if you've seen me present, I love single slides with really big words on them. And I love when you scaffold information where it looks like things are animating as I go between my slides and kind of highlight different things, which is also, I think, a key thing to think about is where you're presenting. So if I'm presenting on Chart Chat and we're using StreamYard to do our live stream, when I load my slides in, all the animations go away. So I actually have to build more slides to create that animation effect if I'm loading my slides into StreamYard. So as someone who presents a lot across different platforms and in different virtual and in-person spaces, knowing where I'm presenting with what technology is really important because it actually changes what my presentation path looks like.
Well, that's not necessarily StreamYard. It's because of the tool you prefer to use when presenting with StreamYard. I know Andy.
I like loading in my slides into StreamYard versus sharing my screen because I can drive my slides from within StreamYard. And I like that approach. And I'm willing to put the extra time in to create the fake animations.
Amanda, that's a good point, by the way, Steve. I just was going to say, I always present from my laptop, and I never use anybody else's because I have certain fonts, or I just never know what it's going to look like. And so I always share my screen, or I always use my laptop.
Also, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, you never use Presenter View, do you?
I don't.
You're just, no.
I do not either. I cannot use Presenter View. It will distract the bejesus out of me. I cannot use Presenter View, and I cannot use note cards or notes. I cannot. Everything is.
And wait, and there is Andy looking gobsmacked. Could you look gobsmacked again, Andy?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you don't use Presenter View, how do you know what's coming next? I mean, so I use Presenter View because this. Actually, I don't want you to see that yet. That is the most important part of how I present, is knowing what the next slide is.
Oh, and Andy, hold. And Amanda, and I'm dying to, Andy, I've got a bunch of things I want to probe, but Amanda, you mentioned, a slide that just has 2 words on it and a really big font on it. How do you feel when you're seeing a presentation or about having bullet points on a slide, or where people are reading text rather than hanging on your every word? What
trigger me from my days of going to public health conferences and listening to research talks. I always feel like I stop listening to the presenter unless I close my eyes. I end up trying to read all the bullet points on the slide and keep up with them, and it distracts me. And so I end up finding that the slides are more of a distraction than a support. And I think there are certainly spaces for more text-heavy slides. I think Nancy Duarte has some great stuff on slide docs that are kind of this fusion of documents. And if you're in a business environment and you're building a slide set meant to be left behind after the meeting or read before and then presented bit by bit, you might want all those details on there. So I'll give people a pass on those. But in a big conference talk or a presentation, I want people focused on what I'm saying and describing, not on trying to read every teeny tiny word on the slides.
And Andy, Jeff, what do you think about this as well? Agree with that? That you fear if you put a lot of text on a slide, it's going to be distracting. And do you do the same thing as well? Yeah.
I would just say there's different types of presentations, right? And we probably fall in, most of the presentations we do are kind of what we just did with Chart Chat here or a workshop, but I've been involved with other decks, right? Decks that go to Wall Street, finance, whatever. And those are really dense financial information and loads of things. In the academic world, students like to have those bullets for study guides or something. So I think there's other opportunities where you can do it, but if you're in a room presenting in front of people up on with PowerPoint, I'm with Amanda. I would just start zoning out, and I might as well just read the slides. I don't need you there.
And as Jeff pointed out, Ken Robinson, the 2 times I saw him present, no slides whatsoever. He's just giving a talk. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
I was at an event in Manchester, UK, and the keynote speaker was a really senior guy from NASA talking about how they use data at NASA. It was astonishing, a brilliant talk. He had 5 slides with bullets, right? And it rendered his talk really, really dull. And because we were reading along as he went. And it's like, you work at NASA, for God's sake. You've got the best stock photo library in the world or in the universe. And it was just bullets. So it was just such an own goal. It was really disappointing.
Well,
yeah, and if people want takeaways, by the way, that was in one of the comments. You can always create another takeaway document. Take a, give a notes
Yeah.
reference or
Yeah.
some kind of
Notes.
addendum, or put it in the back, right, as a last page of your deck that you don't use in your presentation. That's what I would do as if I were presenting and still had to give a bunch of resources.
Or put it on a
Great.
website. People load it on a
Yeah.
website
Yeah,
with a QR code, right? I've seen lots of that where it's like, go to this page on my Substack, my website. You'll find all my resources, maybe my downloadable slides if you're Alberto, who gives his slides away for free all the time. So there's lots of options there that don't involve reading bullet points out loud.
Well, the one of the reasons I wanted to interview my colleagues is you're three of the best presenters I've ever seen. You bring out the best in me. I'll see techniques that you'll use and go, oh my God, that's great. Hey, can I borrow that slide in the presentation? That was such a good way to explain this difficult concept. So, Andy, you've given presentations about giving presentations. So I think I'm going to move to that, which is, what are some of the top pieces of advice that you would give people? And what do you consider as, I have to have this technique or this capability, this approach that I do has really served me well over the years?
First of all, here's the way I prepare for big data presentations. Post-its, write all your ideas down, and then color code them, and then organize it into structure. That's one way of doing it. But
Wow.
Dang.
I do that less now. That's quite an old photo, that. But I do that less now. Now I kind of know what I want to do. But right, one tip: when I am presenting data, I want to control where your eyes are looking at any given moment. That is my supreme goal for every single data presentation, right? Because this is like every chart you've ever seen, visual overload. Who the hell knows where you're supposed to be looking for, right? So when I'm presenting data, I'm thinking about how to point. If I see you standing to the side of a big screen, pointing vaguely into the direction of that chart, nobody knows what you're pointing at. So don't do that. So here's 3 ways that I use to get around it. This is a dashboards, big dashboards book. You can use shapes. You can literally stick things on your PowerPoint. This KPI has a red dot. It means it's not on target. The red dots here are the categories that are causing the problem. And here's a new chart we added in order to let you do more detailed reporting. So literally point the people with PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever assets. The second thing you can do is use clickers or pointers. So I love this mouse and I love the Logitech Spotlight because they let me spotlight on the text. So let me draw your attention to this dot. The red dot shows us a problem. These are the categories causing the problem. And this is the chart we added. Another thing I do is, using morphing. So this is the same script. This KPI is the one that's problematic. We can see which are the contributors to the problem. And we also added a new chart down in the bottom right to allow you to do better reporting. What I'm doing in this last one is I love using the morph slide transition. What's actually going on here is on this slide, there is the dashboard, but there's also a secret, smaller, cropped picture of the dashboard too. And then I changed from going from slide to slide. I changed the crop and I changed the location so that it goes from one slide to the other. So the goal is, at any given moment, control where you are looking your eyes by working out how to point. And they are 3 ways that I do it: with a clicker, with PowerPoint shapes, or using multiple images and morphs and crops. There you
Andy,
go.
thank you. I could spend another hour speaking with the 3 of you about how you approach this. I'm always dazzled by your presentations, but we are coming to the end of our time. So, Amanda.
We are. Steve, before we wrap up with our wrap-up slides, do you have any one big tip or idea you want to share with folks, since we didn't get to hear from you about how you prep for presentations?
Follow the 3 of you, then look at what I do. That's my tip.
Pick good co-presenters, right? That's step number 1. All right. Well, it's been great to have everyone here for Chart Chat today. Jeff, thanks for the masterclass all about box plots that we know folks are bookmarking. And we hope you'll join us for an Olympic lightning round next month, where on March 12th, we are going to dive in and talk about some of the fabulous graphics that have come out of this year's games and perhaps some previous Olympics that we just can't get out of our minds. So we hope you'll join us on March 12th to go ahead and have that deep dive into Olympic data visualization. We also invite you to join our after party. We always hop off from this live stream over into a Zoom room, not recorded, just for hanging out. And we love to see all the familiar faces and new chart chatters to go ahead and join us and share your thoughts about how you present and about box plots in this case. We also want to remind you about the survey, what's going on with Chart Chat. We want to improve Chart Chat for you, so feel free to take that survey. We'll add the link in the chat below, just in case you missed it or don't grab the QR. And because we can't miss it, Steve, we have another fun thing coming up before Chart Chat. What's happening in early March?
Yes, I've been working with an incredible team of people to bring an incredible data set to life, which is women maestras on Broadway, conductors, music directors, music supervisors. Over the years, 25 people took on this data set and submitted their take on the stuff. And we have 3 or 4 visualizations of this data that are just gobsmackingly good. There, I've used that word twice today. Please join us on March 3rd at 11 a.m. when we look at some of the stellar submissions and we'll announce the winner.
Love it. As always, you can find more from us on dashboardsthatdeliver.com. The book is now available anywhere you buy your books, and we'd love if you'd write a review to help the book get out to more people. You can also find additional workshops, recordings, and resources on bigbookofdashboards.com, including one of the dashboards Andy was showing you. That one is on Big Book of Dashboards if you want to check it out. With that, though, we welcome you to go ahead and hop on over to the after party. Go to bigpic.me/after. It's been a great time having you all here at Chart Chat. We hope to see you at the after party. If not, join Steve for Broadway music conductor features in early March, and then join us for our next Chart Chat happening on March 12th, where we celebrate the Olympics. Thanks to everyone, and we'll see you at the after party.